My name is Comfort Okolo. I'm a retired specialist nurse. Worked with sickle cell and thalassemia in Newham for several years. Sickle cell is a blood disorder passed on to children from both mom and dad directly. When somebody has a sickle cell disorder, they've inherited the unusual hemoglobin S without the usual hemoglobin A. So anybody who has hemoglobin S without an A has a sickle cell disorder, and there are several different sickle cell disorders. I mentioned hemoglobin A, which is the usual hemoglobin type. If somebody has hemoglobin A, that hemoglobin absorbs a lot of oxygen, and the red blood cells that carry the hemoglobin around the body need the red blood cells to stay soft and flexible. When somebody has sickle hemoglobin, which is hemoglobin S, the hemoglobin doesn't carry a lot of oxygen. And when the oxygen content in the red cell is reduced, it collapses and forms the sickle or the banana shape. As well as that, it becomes quite hard and quite sticky. So when they stick together, they jam up the blood vessels and they stop the blood going around the body. And that's what the problem with sickle cell is. If somebody has hemoglobin A and hemoglobin S, the hemoglobin A actually has enough oxygen and the red cell maintains its shape and texture. So somebody can have an AS, which is the sickle cell trait, or can be called a healthy carrier, and never know it until they have a blood test. The important thing there is that any child they have could inherit either the usual hemoglobin A or the hemoglobin S. So if there's hemoglobin S from one parent and anything other than hemoglobin A from the other parent, then that child has a sickle cell disorder. The most common is SS, and on paper the most severe is SS because all the hemoglobin is capable of sickling. SC is another combination. The C in itself doesn't sickle, but unfortunately doesn't stop the sickle cells from sickling, and that's why any combination where there's an S without an A is a sickle cell disorder. I think first and foremost, be aware what your hemoglobin type is. Find out. Don't say because I'm not ill, I'm not unwell, so I don't have it. Or it doesn't happen in my family, because I've known people who it doesn't happen in their family, and men, of course. I'm not being sexist here, but it's usually, it's not in my family. And I told somebody, but you do have a sister. And somebody will tell you your sister is not in his family, and he's talking about your family. And he sort of looked at me, I thought, oh crumbs, I haven't thought about that. But again, it's important that sickle cell trait is not actually an illness, it doesn't affect you, and it's only a blood test that can tell you that you have a sickle cell trait. So be aware what your hemoglobin genotype is. And I think sometimes something we actually do forget is that your blood group is not your hemoglobin type. And people have actually known their blood group, and one of the blood groups is A, and actually thought that was their hemoglobin genotype they were talking about. And that is something that's so very important. Your blood group is not the same thing as your hemoglobin type. Sickle cell is predominant where there's malaria, but because it's genetic, you cannot actually tie it down to any ethnic group. So countries where there's malaria, you find that the sickle cell incidence is higher, but anybody can actually have a sickle cell trait. We don't know how far back, what's happened way back in our generations. And we actually have an example where we had a young man who was very, very good. The sister was pregnant, had AS, and came to us. She didn't believe it. And went and blamed the mother that she doesn't know who the father was, tell me who my father is because I've got sickle cell trait, and only black people, have sickle cell traits. And we sort of disabused her mind there and just said it's genetic, so it can come from predominantly, yes, people of African, Asian, Mediterranean, but it can be anywhere. So the safest thing, if you're found to have any hemoglobin traits, it doesn't matter what the ethnic origin of your partner is, the safest thing is to actually have a test.